everyone, thanks for joining me for today's colouring tutorial. I'm going to be doing an example of what I call negative colouring, which is colouring on the top of a darker background. In this case it's this green cardstock. I've printed my image a couple of times on my inkjet printer, and I'm going to be using coloured pencils to colour in. What I want to demonstrate to you today is the difference between colouring the image directly and applying a white undercoat first, just so that you can see that there's a slight there's quite a difference between the two methods. So you're going to get a lot more vibrancy if you've got the white undercoat. I will explain things as I go, but I'll also skip forward a few times, speed up the video or move ahead, just so that you don't have to sit through the whole process, because that could take quite a while. But what I'm doing is using these Prismacolor pencils. I've already selected the colors that I'm going to use, and I'm just applying it. The cardstock I'm using is just a nice smooth cardstock. And when you're coloring with pencils, the pencil actually sits on the surface of your cardstock. So if you've printed the image, you just sort of need to take a little bit of extra care not to color over the top of your printed line work, because that will just disappear. So if I were to colour over the top of these little spots, the little mouth, the little stones for the mouth, they kind of disappear. It doesn't matter, because you can place them back in with a pen. After you've gone over the top, you can just use a permanent marker to mark them back in. So all I'm doing first of all is just laying down a sort of a soft coat of the white on the snowman. Of course, he's made of snow, so he's going to be white. And then I will add in the highlights. So just a very soft coat. I'll go over his whole body, and then I'll come back in with some highlights. All right, so there's my snowman. He's all coloured with the base coat. Now what I'm going to do is to bring the white back in the higher areas, so the areas that come forward more. Remember, if you've seen any of my previous colouring videos, we colour for shape. So to shape this guy, the areas that are closest to us, so for instance down his arm here, they would be the areas where you would lay the highlights to sort of make that arm look rounded. So that's what I'm going to do next. Just with the pencil, I'm going to add another layer of white. To do the negative colouring, I always add in the bright highlights. So this is really obvious. You can see that line very clearly. And that's going to be my lightest area. So I don't know, let me come a little bit closer. You can see how really bright that is. When we finish this up, we're going to make a much smoother transition between that bright highlight and then the more shadowy areas. So you're going to feather that color down into the darker areas. But that's what you're going to do first. That's how I do this coloring first. I add in those highlighted areas. So sort of here on his cheeks would be nice and white and bright, but not too far down near his chin. Just across the brow, just take care across the brow, because the eye sockets are quite dark. So the areas around the eyes, they stay quite dark. And under his nose would be also a little darker. But just here around his mouth, sort of in the cheek area, we want to bring that forward so that looks like it's coming out toward us. This other arm, there'd be a sort of a bright highlight on top of that until just before that hand, because we want to give the impression that that hand is ducking down, that arm is ducking down behind that hand. And then here across his middle, around his belly, that would be nice and bright as well. And on this side, and that's going to be the dark, or the brightest of the pigment, the brightest of the white. And we're going to work backwards from there. Also on the snow at the bottom, the highlight of the snow would be on the top of those hills. So these little tiny hills, that would be the really bright part. There's a hill here. And there's a hill here. Not too close to anywhere where it tucks in though. So when it comes sort of a bit closer here to the snowman itself, that would be a bit darker, because that forms a natural shadow. And here at the back, just at the top of the hill. Okay, so we've got all our highlights in for the white. Make sure you keep your pencil fairly sharp. Now all I'm going to do is smooth down that difference. So where it's really highlighted, I'm going to take my pencil and make that less of an obvious line, just by starting on the white and then working out toward the darker colors and slowly releasing the pressure that you're placing on your pencil. So there's less pigment laid down, but it's a more gradual effect. So it doesn't sort of, you can't see that line quite as easily. It's a much more smooth transition. Now his thumb will be a little bit brighter too because that's quite high. So I'll just add a little bit more pressure there on the thumb. And then under the arm here, that would be the darkest part. So we won't add too much more white right down underneath that arm because we want that to look like it's quite shadowy. All right, so what I'm going to do is continue to colour him in right around the white parts, right around where he's made of snow. And then after that, we'll work on the other bits and pieces in the image, so the heart and the things he's wearing. I'm just finishing off the back, the hills down beneath the snowman, and again just softening that transition between the real highlights and the rest of the pencil. You do want the difference though. It's nice to have the different levels of colour, the different layers of colour. That gives a bit more depth to the image. All right, so that's all the white laid in. Now what we're going to do next is work on those other areas. So his little nose is, I'm using a colour called Mineral Orange. I didn't want to go too vibrant in orange, but I'm just going to lay that straight over the card, over the green card, with a soft layer. So colouring is all about layering your pigments. So we just add the first layer is just so that you can see that colour difference. And then we bring in another layer, the same colour, a bit more intensity where we want the darker areas to be, or the, in this case, the highlighted areas to be. So we're going to add pretty much down the strip of the carrot, and along the top is where a lot of that colour is going to be, a lot of that pigment. There we go. And that green is what's forming the shadow areas for us. Right. Next is we're going to give him, the heart is going to be red. So I've got two shades of red. I've got a Scarlet Lake and a Raspberry to do a little bit deeper of a shadow. But again, it's layering that first colour down. So a nice light layer. And then adding a little bit more colour in the highlighted areas. So here at the top of the heart, there'll be a bit more red. And then fade it into the green. And we're actually going to bring the raspberry into those shadow areas a little bit more. And that will just increase that contrast. So there's our red. Might just add a little bit more. And again, fade the colour by releasing the pressure on the pencil. So less pigment is coming out or coming from the pencil. And then we're just going to add in the darker raspberry at the bottom and work back up into that lighter red. And same here, underneath his hands, there'd be a natural shadow there. Okay, so that's the heart. And then we're going to give him a purple and red hat. So I'll start with the purple. I'm using a 1008, which is the, let me just check on my list, the Parma Violet directly over that green. So I'm going to skip each one so I can add the red. Just a light layer. Turn your piece of cardstock as you're colouring, just to make it easier for yourself. If you're right-handed like I am, then try to work from the left-hand side across so that you're not dragging the palm of your hand across your work. That tends to smudge it a little bit. And if you're left-handed, work the other way. All right, so a little bit, the highlight here would be in the center of the hat. So running along around here, that would be the part that's lifted up a bit further, and that's the part where we want to add a little bit more of this lighter purple. I'll do that all around. And then the shadowy area will be the darker purple. And then what I'll do, I'll go on and I'll color the other pieces in red, and his scarf in red as well. When you're colouring and you're looking just for a really light layer, that first layer that you're laying down, it's a good idea to hold your pencil right back at the end, more so than towards the point. And that allows you to get a lot lighter pressure on the pencil. The further you move down, the heavier that pressure is going to be. It's just occurs naturally depending on where you're holding it. It is a little bit more difficult to control when it's further away, but you can certainly come lower when you need a bit more control over the pencil. That's just one of the tips for when you're colouring. That light layer, that first layer, is easier to achieve when you're holding the pencil back down the shaft a little bit. Now we're nearly finished, so I'm just adding the red to the scarf, and then I'm going to add in those shadows, the darker red, and then this guy with this image will be finished. Right, so that's pretty much coloured. Now, the last step with any image that you colour is making sure that the eyes are nice and vibrant. So that's where the focal point is of any character are the eyes. So what I like to do is to take a black pen and a white pen, just carefully now. So just go over the entire, let me lift this up first so that you can see it. So the eye here already has a little circle, and that's the eye shine. So in eyes, the eyes are quite moist, and the light shines on that moisture in the eye, and that's what actually brings the character to life. What I'm doing is I'm going over the eye with my pen, with my black pen. I've gone over that little eye shine as well, so you can see I've coloured it all in, and it already loses. So compared to this one that still has the eye shine, even though it's green, it's a lot more lifelike than when you colour it in black if there's no white dot. But I colour over the top first, so right over, just to bring it back, because sometimes that as I said before, that pencil or the pigment makes it disappear a little bit. And then we reintroduce the eye shine with a white pen. So I'm just going to get a little bit of scrap of paper here and get the ink flowing, because I only want a little dot. And then you want the dot to be in the same location. So I've placed this dot slightly off to the left. I want the dot to be slightly off to the left on the other eye as well, so that he doesn't look cross-eyed or anything like that, and the light's coming from the same direction. Right, so that's our first one. Now, for the second snowman, as I mentioned in the beginning, what I'm going to do is colour the entire image in with a light layer of white pencil and then build the colours up over the top. So I'll set to work doing that white pencil layer first, and then we'll talk about layering the colour over the top of that white pencil and the difference, so we can then compare the two images and see what difference it makes to have that foundation in. So I've coloured the image in. I've got my base of white all laid down. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I did over in this picture with the snowman, and that's colour in the highlights on his face and arms and body, just the same way I did last time. So I'm going to make sure I feather those down into the shadows all around his body. and then we'll start on the coloured sections. Our layer of white has now been added. So what I'm going to do is work in those colours, the same colours over the top. I'm going to start again with his nose. So that's the mineral orange that we used earlier. 1033 is the Prismacolor number if you're interested. And all I'm going to do is just colour over the top, same way I did before, but this time it has that white base to work on. So one layer of the orange, and then we're going to add the highlight along the top of the carrot, and sort of fading a little bit as we go toward the bottom. Okay, and then we're going to start on the red heart. Just make sure my pencil is nice and sharp. Again, that light layer over the white. And we're going to concentrate this lighter red at the top of the heart. And then slowly fade as we work down towards the snowman's arms, because that's where we're going to add that raspberry, the darker red. We also just want a little bit down here, not too much because it's the bottom of the heart, a little bit more here in the center, and then fade off again as we get under those arms. Bring in the darker red. This is 1030 raspberry. And again, so we apply it with most pressure here in the shadow, and then slowly release that pressure as we work up toward the lighter red. Color over the top so that you get that nice smooth transition, but just very lightly. And then down here under his hands, and then work back into that lighter red. His hat. Adding the last shadow now to the purple here at the edge of the hat. And we're just about done. I'm going to add that black pen and the white pen to the little eyes. And what I want to stress here with this technique, and pretty much with all the techniques that are out there, is I'm not trying to show a right versus wrong at all, just different. So here's our two images, all coloured. This is the image that we started just colouring directly onto the green cardstock, and this is the one that had the white base. You can see that there is a bit of a difference. This one is a lot more vibrant. Laying that white base down gives us something to work on and layers those colours together. So the white gives the red and the purple and the orange a base to work on, so that it sits on top of that white rather than sitting on top of the green in this picture. But again, it's really personal preference. Some people will prefer this look, and this look may suit your project better. Others might prefer that more vibrant look. It's really a matter of taste. Thank you very much for joining me. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send me an email. As always, I'm always around. Otherwise, hop over to the blog and you can leave a comment on there if you need or want anything. Have a great day. Thanks a lot. Bye.